Alright, Math 1. Today your essential question is, can you solve a multi-step equation? And do you recognize when a problem has more than one solution? An absolute value equation is simply an equation that contains an absolute value. And some examples of what that might look like would be the absolute value of x equals 2, or the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 5, or 3 times the absolute value of 2x plus 1 equals 6. Those are all examples of absolute value equations. Now, an absolute value equation, the reason that one of our essential questions contains this is that absolute value equations always have two solutions. Because if I look at the absolute value of x equals 2, there are two numbers that could possibly go in here to satisfy this equation. If I had a 2 in here, the absolute value of 2 is 2, but also the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. So you have to write both answers. So in this case, it would be x equals 2 or negative 2 would be our final answer. They're not all that simple, however. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They see that and they think, oh, well, that's easy. You just write the opposite. But that's not the case. Every single time, you have to set up two equations every single time. So take a look at letter A. Solve and graph the solutions. We're not going to graph them today. I know you know how to graph a number on the number line. So, x minus 4 equals 6. If I just have the absolute value here, whatever x minus 4 is could equal 6, because that's what our problem says. But whatever is inside of that absolute value could also equal negative 6. So you have to set up two equations and then solve them both, and that'll give you your two answers. So we add 4, and we get x equals 10, add 4 here, x equals negative 2. You have to set up both equations. Now, for letter B, we have 3x plus 1 equals negative 5. An absolute value can never, ever, ever, ever equal a negative. So if all we have here is the absolute value equals some negative number, there's no solution. Okay? Let's see. Letter B. This is the really super simple kind. X could be 10 or negative 10. And here we have to set up two equations. So x minus 1 equals 4, or x minus 1 equals negative 4. So in this case, x could equal 5. And here if I add 1, it would be negative 3. I did have another. Okay, letter E. Here we have our absolute value equals a negative, so there's no solution. On letter F, we have to set up our two equations. 4x minus 5 equals 8, or 4x minus 5 equals negative 8. So I add 5 to both sides. 4x equals 13. Add 5 here. 4x equals negative 3. Divide by 4. So x could be 3/4 or 13/4, and you can leave them that way. And on letter G, so G is where things change just one more time. Anytime we have an absolute value equation, we have to get rid of whatever is not included in the absolute value first. So I would add 10 and then evaluate this as an absolute value equation and set up my two equations. So anytime there's something on the outside of the absolute value, we get rid of it, and then we can evaluate it as an absolute value equation. So 3x plus 9 equals 6, 3x plus 9 equals negative 6. Subtract 9. 3x equals negative 3, x equals negative 1, or subtract 9, 3x equals negative 15, so x equals negative 5. H is more of the same. We have to get rid of whatever's here. So the absolute value of x minus 2 is 4. X minus 2 is 4. X minus 2 is negative 4. Add 2 to both sides. X equals 6. Or x equals negative 2. Alright, turn your paper over to the next page. On I and J, same thing, except instead of something added or subtracted, we have something multiplied. So we would just divide by 4. And then 2x plus 7 equals 4, or 2x plus 7 equals negative 4. And if you solve both of those, we end up with x equals negative 1.5 or negative 5.5. And on J, we have something subtracted and something multiplied. So we do those in the same order that we normally would. Add 3. So we get negative 2, absolute value of 5x minus 1 equals negative 8. And then divide by negative 2. So the absolute value of 5x minus 1 equals 4. And if we solve those, set up both of our equations, we get x equals 1 or negative 3/5. Alright, in a cheerleading competition, the minimum length of a routine is 4 minutes. The maximum length of a routine is 5 minutes. Write an absolute value equation that has these minimum and maximum lengths as its solution. So, to figure out the absolute value equation, we find out exactly what's in the middle of our two numbers. So if we have 4 and 5 minutes, the middle would be 4.5 minutes. And because we have the middle, we can say the absolute value of x minus 4.5 is 0.5. So every time we're writing an absolute value equation, inside the absolute value, we want to write our we want to subtract always, and the 4.5 is the number that goes here is always whatever is in the middle of the two options. And then our answer is always the distance to get to each solution. So to get from 4 to 4.5 was 0.5, and to get from 4.5 to 5 was 0.5. So this is kind of our prescription for writing absolute value equations every time. It's just x minus the middle, and then equals the distance to the actual solutions that we wanted. Alright, let's try another one. Write an absolute value equation that has 5 and 15 as its solutions. So what we need to know is the number that goes here and the number that goes here. So the distance to the middle, or what is in the middle of 5 and 15, that would be 10. And then the distance to each solution, well, to get from 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 is just 5. So this would be our absolute value equation. Okay, let's try one more. For a poem contest, the minimum length of a poem is 16 lines. The maximum length is 32 lines. Write an absolute value equation that has these minimum and maximum lengths as its solution. So the distance to, or the middle number in between 16 and 32, if I add them up, I would get 48 divided by 2 is 24. So the middle of the two numbers is 24, and then how many does it take to get from 16 to 24 and 24 to 32 is just 8. So there's our absolute value equation. On the last page, you have some problems to try. You do not have to graph them, you just need to solve them. Go ahead and try 1 through 11. The first 6 should be fairly easy. 7 through 11 is where I anticipate most questions, but we will go over them in class tomorrow. Have a great night.